Hey everybody, welcome to chapter 8, which is making decisions and managing change. As you can imagine, in the modern workplace, change is constant. We just have things coming up that will change the way we do things, and we have to learn to deal with those. And as managers, we not only have to deal with them, we have to help other people through them. So I just want to start with this is the decision-making process. I'll call it a decision-making process. Like, there's not a single way, but this is a pretty good model for how to make decisions, especially in a systematic, step-by-step way. And so, we start with defining a problem. In other words, what are we trying to accomplish? Then we analyze it, which really means gather facts. I think we've all met people who kind of just jump into problems without really getting a lot of facts about what's going on. And sometimes that doesn't work out so well. The third is to establish decision criteria, which means to come up with a way of deciding which decisions, what's the best way to put that? To decide how to weight or which decisions are the best and which decisions are going to move us closer towards solving the problem, as opposed to those decisions that maybe won't be as useful. So if we're trying to figure out a way to sell more of our product, we can come up with multiple decisions. And so we want to have some criteria to evaluate those decisions, whether it be to run a newspaper advertisement or a radio advertisement, or maybe start making cold calls, or to buy customer lists from a marketing company. We want to sort of have some way of evaluating each of those potential decisions. Then we develop alternatives, evaluate those alternatives, and through that evaluation process, select the best alternative, and then put that alternative into action and review, right? To follow up and say, okay, how did it go? Did that do what we thought it was going to do? So if you ever were in like science in high school and they taught you about the scientific method, it's very similar, okay? Except in the scientific method, we are coming up with a hypothesis, right? Instead of defining a problem to be solved, we're coming up with what we think will happen. But it's the same idea, okay? Sometimes we'll go through that whole process and then we'll put it into practice and it won't work out the way we thought it would. And we have to say, well, why didn't it? And what can we do about it? And how do we solve this problem and start the process over again? The other thing is we have different decision-making styles. Sometimes, what will work for you won't work for someone else. Some people are more risk-oriented. Some people are more risk-averse. And that's not necessarily wrong. Some positions in a company, you want people who are willing to take risks. In others, you want people who are less willing to take risks. And so we do have a decision-making style, but we're not stuck with it, right? We can learn to be more risk-averse if that's what the situation requires, or to take more risks if that's what it requires. And so, as managers, we try to help our people, help first by putting people into situations that best match their style, but also help them to adjust their styles according to the nature of what we're trying to do. So I won't read that whole list to you, but it says to analyze your recent decisions by asking the following questions. So read through those and think about recent decisions you've made, and and see if you can get an idea of how and why you make decisions the way you do. So up on the screen, I have it's kind of I guess you call it a matrix that talks about different decision-making styles. And so you'll see on the x-axis, or the horizontal axis, you have askers, people who ask people, versus tellers, people who tell people. And then on the y-axis, the vertical axis, we have someone who controls emotion, doesn't let people see it, versus people who emote, or people who show their emotion. And then you can see they kind of call the one in the middle, they call that an abdicator. To abdicate is an old word. It used to mean like if somebody was supposed to inherit the royal throne, they chose not to. They abdicated the throne. So abdicating just means choosing not to do the thing that you're supposed to do, or that it's your duty to do. And so a person who is right in the middle of all those styles is a person who often just avoids making decisions, or makes them really fast without much thought, and doesn't give a lot of direction. So someone who controls their emotion and asks a lot of questions is a deep thinker. Decisions are made based on facts and evidence. And then the opposite side there, someone who controls emotion and tells, decisions are made using the available information without help from others. They call that a driver. That's probably my natural style personally, and so I've had to work on it to tell less and ask and listen more, and to I guess I don't control my emotions always the way I should either. So someone who tells and has a lot of emotion is a free spirit. Decisions are made based on personal feelings and feelings of others. And someone who asks and is emotive is a consensus builder. Decisions are made that are acceptable to the group. Now, not one of these is always the best. In certain scenarios, we need people to adjust their management and decision-making style to the needs of the situation. For example, when I was in the military, there were certain scenarios where we didn't have time to talk about consensus or even make deep, thoughtful decisions. We had to just act, right? Sometimes, but when we were making larger plans for what we were doing, then we did need to talk and have consensus from our leaders, and we did need to be more analytical. And so sometimes we have to adjust and do the things we need to do. And also recognize, and this is kind of what I was just saying, that time can impact the decision-making process. In other words, the amount of time we have, sometimes we don't have time to ask every stakeholder, right? Sometimes we have to move, but if we do have time, it's best to go through these questions and involve stakeholders, people who our decision will impact, in the whole process. So now we'll move on to the second part, which is change. Again, we live in a world that's constantly in change. The marketing environment changes, the legal environment changes, the personnel and human relations and human resources environment changes. And so what we have to do is, as managers, is figure out how to deal for change. So this page just has a few, I guess they'd call them terms: unplanned change, which is just what it sounds like, a change we weren't planning for. And also recognizing that change, or progress, I should say, involves change, but not all change is progress. Sometimes it's just change. So we want to manage change as much as we can to help it be progressive or to progress the organization. And recognize that often people are resistant to change. Think of yourself. I know personally, I'm pretty resistant to change. If I've got a good thing going, I don't need people telling me to change it. And sometimes even when it's not that good of a thing, I'm just resistant to the change. So recognize that change disturbs the environment that we're existing in, and we might fear that change because we don't know if the change is going to lead to something better or something worse. So we might just prefer no change. So as supervisors and managers, we need to learn how to overcome resistance to change. So number one, right there at the top, supervisors who regularly interact with their people and show candor and caring and competence, people are more likely to proceed confidently, which means if you communicate with people and work with people well ahead of the change, then usually that you can work them through the change. But if you haven't been a great communicator, then sometimes they'll resist that change. And again, there's always people who resist no matter what. But so being there and being constant and caring to people ahead of time is going to help much more with change coming on down the road. And that involves providing adequate information, so communicating and letting people know what's happening so that they can be prepared for the change. When it's possible, you want to encourage people in the decision making. But sort of a note of warning, if you just give lip service to giving people participation, so you pretend like you want their opinion, but then you just trash all over it, then they're going to be even less likely to want to be part of the change and to help when needed. So if you're going to encourage participation, it has to be real. And so I think that about covers that. Again, I won't read all of it to you, but recognize that getting information you need to make change and consulting with the people it's going to affect can be very valuable. And so, you know, sometimes when you're the manager, especially if you're a manager of a large organization, you can be blind to stuff that's happening beneath you. So getting that information is going to help you make the right changes. They're actually going to help people. And then finally, when you're going to present that to people, you want to have it doesn't have to be formal, it can be informal, it depends on the situation, but you do want to give that information to the people it's going to impact in a way that, again, answers their questions, describes why you're doing the change, and helps them work through it. I know, and you could probably think of situations when we're all kind of in agreement that we need to make a change, and we are all bought into the fact that this change is going to help the problem we're facing, then usually we'll all kind of jump in and we'll do our best. But when management is unwilling to explain that to people, like how it's going to fix the problem or what the problem even is, you will find people rejecting that change. So that's pretty much it for this chapter. I know as you read through the chapter, you'll get more information. These aren't meant to give you a full comprehensive lecture, just meant to cover the high points of the chapter. I hope you have a great week. And again, I hope this is interesting and valuable information for you.